Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Welcome, everybody. I think we'll dive right in. I will present our two speakers, our two guests today. So, Andriy Lyubka, you are a poet, an essayist, a translator from Ukraine. In 2023, you became a member of the Taras Shevchenko National Award Committee of Ukraine. You are the author of 10 collections of poetry. 3? Why do I? No, my sentence. 10 collections of poetry, essays, and travelogues, yeah? Including fiction. And your novel Carbide, which we are gathering around today, was first published in 2015, and we're working with an English translation that came out in 2023. Karim Kattan, you are a novelist and a poet from Palestine. You hold a PhD in comparative literature, and you have published short stories as well as 2 novels. So your first novel, Le Palais des Deux Collines, received the prize, le Prix des 5 continents de la francophonie in 2021. And your second novel, which we are talking about today, L'Éden à l'aube, came out in August of last year. And you are set to publish a collection of poetry in a couple of weeks. You both also regularly publish articles in the press, opinion pieces, 2 of which are mentioned in the presentation by Passa Porta. You can see the references on the website. Sorry. So one by you, Andriy, We Have Learned to Live Without Paying Attention to Death, published by In Le Monde in February 2024. And another one, Karim, Pourquoi Gaza a-t-elle disparu derrière des sophismes, des approximations, des murmures désolés, published in Le Monde also. Welcome. We will also be making time for some questions from the audience. So do prepare them, and we'll pass the mic around. So both novels are quite different in their structure, their style, and what they portray. They are, however, there are underlining themes that I feel bring together, or at least in conversation, both texts. So I will start with Andriy's text. And your novel, Carbide, which I will argue is maybe first and foremost, as is your novel, Karim, a love story. A love between a man and a woman, a love for a nation, a love for an idea, an ideal, love that drives the story and takes it to questionable and somewhat absurd and burlesque situations, although the tone changes throughout the novel. The book opens in Vedmediv, a fictional town, inhabited by lively and quite dark characters, one of which is Tis. It is by falling into an open sewer hole that Tis, a drunken and somewhat delirious historian, maybe also a little bit washed up, and the protagonist of the novel, comes up with his great idea. The idea he was searching for all his life, the idea which he believes will make his name known for generations to come and will contribute to Ukrainian society. So as a historian, he feels it is his duty to teach his neighbors and society about the glory of Ukrainian history. So broadly speaking, the project consists of building an underground tunnel underneath the Hungarian border, which will provide a secret pathway to Europe, and so the European Union. And he rallies a few community members, for the most part who happen to be local criminals, a lot, and who see a way to make money also, so by smuggling things. So in a way, the city comes alive through the underground, tunnels the water in an attempt at ignoring borders. Forgive my long introduction, but can you talk about this underground project, which is the starting point, really, of the novel?
Hello, good day. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for your question and for reminding me the plot of the novel, because I wrote it very long time ago. It is my first novel. It was published 10 years ago in Ukraine, and I started my work after 2012. Maybe you remember at that moment we had Euro 2012 football championship in Ukraine and Poland together. And all of these ideas about Europeization and European integration of Ukraine were really strong and alive at that moment. But in my hometown, I live in the borderland near Carpathian Mountains, just on the border with Slovakia and Hungary. So in my hometown, the tunnel was discovered, and it was really strange tunnel because it was made from concrete and had electricity and had some kind of a small train which goes in it, and this tunnel actually ran to Slovakia and was used for smuggling cigarettes and something like this. And it was really, for us, for inhabitants of the small town, it was really like a big scandal and big story, because it was long trans-international subway. And for that moment, it was the biggest infrastructure object which was built in my region for last 30 years. Yeah, so it was really a funny story. And after the revolution in 2013, Euromaidan, Revolution of Dignity, I started to realize that I can, in some way, I can research the topic of this European dream in Ukrainian reality. And what was important also for me at that moment, that novel is funny, is full of absurd, and in a way stylistically it is linked to Candide by Voltaire, and it is François Rabelais type of the novel. But for me it was really important also that novel is critical, and that the humor we have in it, it is critical, and in some way we can laugh. But in Ukrainian we say this phrase that сміх крізь сльози, that we can laugh and have tears at the same moment, yeah, because we see ourselves and a lot of the problems which we have in our society. And it was, as for a young writer, it was a really nice experience and really nice trip just to improvise, to experiment with different approaches, to write funny criminal story, but which is important for the society and which is linked to ongoing events, which are much bigger than the life in small borderland town.
Because so inspired by a true story somehow. Oh, no, wonderful. And so with because what you say about laughing and crying at the same time speaks to each character in this novel, right?
Yes, a lot of the characters and the protagonists of the novel are real persons with their own biographies, and part of them are really known in the neighborhood and in Ukraine, because, for example, the mayor of the city, which is also protagonist of the story, and he is a part of this corrupted smuggling project. Of course, he is recognizable in Ukraine. And when the novel was published, we had a really nice, funny story, because it was some kind of press conference, and I was asked by the journalists, maybe you are afraid because you wrote about this guy with surname, yeah, he is so powerful and rich, and probably you put yourself in a risk because you are so critical in portraying him. And I answer, no, because I cannot imagine the situation in which this politician is with a book. Yeah. So I am totally safe because we have no risks that that, you know, this portrait will actually go to these circles. And what was, in a way, I was in a position that story is very deeply based on the local context. And for now, this novel is translated more than to 10 languages. And the English translation, when it was published, I went to a small tour in Canada and the USA. And I was I was really afraid because I am from this local Carpathian context. It is in the middle of nowhere, and I'm going to some cities like New York. Yeah? What should I tell them about some small town and smugglers who live near Carpathian mountains? It was really like a marginal story. But, and what we discovered now and we are facing now, when I went to, for example, to Los Angeles with the presentation of the book, they told me this book is totally about California and Los Angeles, because all of the things you are portraying there, tunnels, drones and small airplanes which are going above the border and transporting different stuff, a lot of people smuggling also through the border, and this link between criminals, corrupted smugglers and politicians in local government, it is totally about Los Angeles. So it was actually nice
To relate.
nice story. Yeah.
Thank you. Karim Kattan, l'Eden à l'aube. So I'm saying these two books are love stories. Yours is a love story that is between two Palestinians, a love story that is disrupted, obstructed somehow. It takes place in Palestine in the context of a completely deregulated geography. This geography, for a lack of a better word, but this geography is, of course, a direct consequence of colonization and apartheid Israel has imposed on Palestine. And in the novel, the deregulated geography is also a consequence of the Khamsin, so a wind, a sandstorm, which takes over everything. So the Khamsin, which is usually a story of a couple of hours or a couple of days, in the novel becomes a real protagonist, punctuates the whole story and the lives of the people for what seems to be an endless season, the summer. This wind of sand embodies a very real and concrete violence, all the while subtracting Palestine from its geography and temporality. Can you talk a little bit about this choice of the sandstorm englobing Palestine?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. So when I first started writing this book, Les Dents à l'Aube, so maybe 3-4 years ago, my ambition at first was to write a love story in Palestine, a cute, poetic love story in Palestine, that does not deal at all with the occupation, with colonization, or with apartheid. I really went in wanting to, at least within one novel, free myself in the imagination from this. Which is not what the novel ended up being about, because in the end, specifically apartheid, from these three realities of Palestine, apartheid is very structural. It structures the novel because, so obviously it's a passionate love story, which implies that you're describing two intimacies meeting on some level. And obviously, Palestinian intimacies are shaped by the realities of apartheid. So it was quite late in the writing where it's like, but I'm not saying anything about these characters. Like, I get it, I want to liberate myself from this, blah, blah, blah. But like, I mean, within that context, you can't understand anything about these protagonists if you subtract these structuring realities from the story. So I had a sort of conundrum where I really, first of all, I'm very attached to the fact that I'm a novelist and I write fiction. I'm really very attached to that because I keep having to remind people this is fiction, as if we didn't have access to fiction. So I'm attached to this. I'm attached also to the possibility that we have generally, and we Palestinians, of within the art that we make to decide to refuse the parameters of the violence that we receive or the parameters of our destruction. So I think it's essential to be able to write stories that, sort of dismiss, apartheid, for example. I think it's important. It's not a disconnection from reality. I think it's an aesthetic and political gesture that should exist. But so I couldn't do it for that specific novel. It didn't work. And one of the challenges I had, which is why the Khamsin is there, is how do you describe occupation specifically? Because for people who maybe have not experienced occupation or haven't really seen it firsthand, I think one of the difficulties is to understand exactly what it entails. And so if I say occupation, in general, people will think of settlements, they'll think of the apartheid wall, they'll think of, I don't know, bulldozers, stuff like that. I mean, the structuring elements of the occupation of the West Bank. But these monumental realities of the occupation are actually the least important. I mean, whether the wall is here or not doesn't change anything. Like, the mobility of Palestinians is not defined by that wall. Palestinians can't move. Even if the wall was not there, we still could not move. And the reality of occupation is, in fact, simply a huge administrative, sophisticated administration that administers the lives of Palestinians, in this case in the West Bank, from birth to death. And like all administrations, it is incredibly boring. I mean, the reality of occupation is boring. It's in every single little detail of your life. It's a bureaucracy, it's an administration, it's papers. It is the violence as well. But there is this other, like, low-level, constant violence. And the Khamsin, that wind within the story that sort of destroys everything, but really with a low-level type of violence, and smuggles everywhere in people's clothes and their asses and their, like, everywhere, is also, I think, a sort of metaphor of this, like, this atmospheric violence that we live within.
And this atmospheric violence, we have it also in the city of Jerusalem, right? But in a different way, because it's, I think it's Isaac doesn't understand why we call it the old city, and it becomes almost subterranean, ghost-like. He even himself feels like he's walking as a ghost in the city. And I thought that maybe it was something that brought your novels together, because characters come alive. Because Jerusalem is a city where he's also going to love and be loved. It's a city of projection, very historic, obviously, but very kind of lively in different ways. And so borders are they not destroyed, but a little bit less visible in the subterranean city for both, or not?
There's a thing in the novel, again, not in real life, but the novel works with a lot of different binaries and dualities between many things. There's a whole thing between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, because Tel Aviv is present in the novel, like this other city. But there's also another duality that comes up, it crops up, I think, twice. So in two paragraphs, twice, where I think Isaac and then maybe the consul remember that there's a country below the country. So when I think it's when one of the characters takes a car from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, a foreigner in this case, he sort of, at the edge of his mind, there is the idea that there is a previous country in the soil of that country that's sort of hidden below. And there's this real, also, I guess, dichotomy between he says that the country, sorry if it's in French, so I think assoupi or endormi or something like that, below the other country. So it's also, I mean, this is a constitutive reality of this whole territory anyway. And it shapes also the way we see ourselves as dual beings, here but not here. I think there's this idea of here but not here that comes up all the time.
Absolutely, and this idea of here and not here, and of this country and history that shapes the underground and the ideal.
Yeah, actually it is very interesting, because you were speaking about Khamsin, and I wrote an essay about Khamsin, because I think that it is very nice metaphor, you know, when you want to avoid to see real problems. You have Hamsin in your air, and after that it is much more safer for you not to realize a real danger or real situation on the ground. And I cannot agree with you that my novel is a love story, because I think that the main protagonist is not actually Tiz himself, this teacher of history, but the main protagonist of my novel is a border, maybe phenomenon of the border. So I raise up near the border, and it is very interesting border because it is border of Ukraine, Hungary, and Romania. So different language groups, not only different status. For example, EU and NATO, and on this side, Ukrainian. And for me, in this small town, by the way, it is small town in Treskapese in which Bela Bartok, famous composer, grew up and gave his concerts. So it is really multi-ethnic neighborhood. And for me, it was really interesting from the very young years, because I went to the Tisa River, which is the border actually, and I was a small fisherman, a fisher child maybe, and I was fishing, and for me this phenomenon of the border was really mysterious, because you see no fence, no wall, but you realize that the border goes on the center flow of the river. And you understand that, for example, nothing changed on the other side. The same trees, same stones, same birds, air, everything is the same, but you have border. And actually, when it goes on the river, it is much more it is not so easy to realize that you have this border. You have to imagine it, first of all. And this phenomenon from my childhood was so important for me that actually I made the border main protagonist of the book. And why I mentioned Candide by Voltaire, because I think that from the period of European Enlightenment, what these guys did at that moment, like Voltaire and Diderot, they started to orientalize Eastern Europe, because when you want to have some supremacy, we are Westerners, we are strong, we are rich, we are progressive and so on, but it is not enough for you. You have someone to compare, and when you see and say, okay, in the eastern side of Europe you have these barbarians, they are wild, they are full, they are bloodthirsty or something like this. When you have this comparison or create it in your book or in your narrative, public narrative, it is much more easier to be supreme, to be above the situation. And I think that the border we have now between Ukraine and the European Union, and the fact that Ukraine is not, because of the war, is not a part of European Union, but first of all because of the stereotypes, and all of these borders we have actually are built in our heads, not on the soil. So walls and borders like fence, it is only a projection of the borders we have in our heads.
The question of the names is very important in both novels. In Carbide, I will quote you a little bit. You write that the ancient city's original name says it all, Mediv, a variation on the Ukrainian word for honey. It's a sweet spot, and that didn't escape the attention of would-be conquerors. The name changed to Vedmediv, a variation on bear, literally a honey finder, when the mighty hordes of the Bear Empire swept westward. The city has had different names. The characters all have names and nicknames, flattering or not, that they assume or not. But the names do stick. Can you tell us a little bit about your choice of these names for the characters?
First of all, it was some kind of a play and a game, a linguistic game, but also it was a possibility, because in my novel I don't write any word about Voltaire and Candide and all of these things. So actually on the level of the tools, literary tools I used during the writing of the novel, was the possibility to give the reader some kind of a sign that you can discover something underground of the story. So we have this story about the tunnel, but I think that if some someone who didn't actually had opportunity to read Voltaire in the student years and so on, can read this book as a criminal story about smuggling at the Ukraine-EU border. And it is very simple, very funny, and realistic story. But you have these signs in the book, and one of them are actually names of the city and names of the main protagonists. And more experienced reader can realize that something is also going on underground the story, underground this criminal plot. And you have to solve these mysteries, and only after that you can conclude that, okay, it is the hidden link with first European novels as a tradition of François Rabelais and Voltaire, and only after that you can conclude some more general, you can come to some more general conclusions. So it was a tool. Still, I'm not sure that it was the best tool to use, but I beg your pardon. At that moment, I was really young, debutant prose writer, and I actually played with these things.
In your novel, Karim Kattan, names also play an important role. First with the two characters, Gabriel and we're speaking in English, so I want to say Isaac, but I'm very uncomfortable because in the novel, Isaac says that it's ridiculous to say Isaac. So we'll call him Isaac or Ishaq, I don't know. I'll ask you the question and then I'll mimic what you do. So can you talk to us a little bit about what's at play about the names that you chose for the characters, and also about what seeps through with the process of naming people is also the question of naming places. So I will quote you also, very early in the novel, you say, so I will quote in French, « Trois mers, un lac, un fleuve. Vous voyez, Isaac et Gabriel viennent d'une terre qu'on nomme parfois Palestine, et qui, si l'on veut, est un isthme. Voilà, c'est inévitable, c'est ainsi. Il faut bien accepter de le nommer. Il faut bien l'ancrer dans cette réalité-là, sans quoi il s'envolerait, il deviendrait air, rien, inconsistance, mais de la pire des façons. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, sure. I'll call them him and him. It's easier. I also want to read the essay about the Khamsin if it's available in English. Well, I think on a basic level, I think the naming of characters is also like one of the deep pleasures of novel making, right? Like creating places and names and stuff is really, it's very pleasurable because it's such a weird experience where you name characters. Like, for a long time, Isaac's name was something else. I know what, but whatever it is. And then, like, very late in the writing process, like, but that makes no sense. And I kept looking for names until I found the perfectly exact names for these two characters. So, Isaac et Gabriel. I'm going to say it in French, which is very strange because the novel takes place in Palestine. These two people are Palestinian. But it's written in French, so I write their names in French. I don't write them in Arabic. Like, I don't write the Arabic version of the names because I'm very attached to not exoticizing my text for foreign audiences who would get a thrill out of, like reading a book about the ailleurs, that word that I can't translate because there's no translation for ailleurs. So I'm very attached to just like saying, this is a book in French, so it's going to be French throughout. But let's say Isaac et Gabriel. Only after publication did it occur to me, really only after publication, when people started telling me, oh, so is it a love story between an Israeli and a Palestinian? I was like, but did you read the book? Like, at no point does it say that. I mean, they're very clearly both Palestinians. Like, that's one of the points of the book. So did it occur to me that it would create like that, I'm sorry to say foreigners, but this is what it is, that foreigners would just assume that these two names, that names mean a belonging, Isaac et Gabriel are names that could as well be Jewish as Palestinian, as whatever, as French, as I mean, they don't say anything about these characters. They only say what I want them to say in the novel. And so obviously they're both biblical names of sorts. Gabriel is the archangel, so this is like one of the threads of the character Gabriel is his sort of mirroring of the archangel Gabriel, whereas Isaac, who we're told chose his name, so very early in the novel, the narrator
He changed
says,
it himself.
yeah, and never says what the other name is. So I think in his teenage years, he decides that he will be called Ishaq, Isaac. One of the reasons why I chose it is also obviously in reference to the biblical Isaac, to this non-sacrificed child, right? Which is very interesting to me. And their names are, I think one of the fundamental subtexts of l'Éden à l'aube is the Song of Songs, donc le Cantique des Cantiques, which is this mystical / erotic / religious song in the Bible, which is referenced throughout l'Éden à l'aube. So l'Éden à l'aube is a deeply biblical text. And so the names also refer to these biblical realities. And the names shift constantly, and they go back and forth between Arabic and the Western language in which I write. Because these shifts are important to me. They also sort of allow me to refuse, to subtract myself from easy categorization that we're tempted to impose on writers from the global south especially, like, you are this, so this is what you write. It's a very difficult thing to negotiate, and shifting these things also, I think, is a way of, maybe imperfect way, but at least my way of also reclaiming some sort of margins and liberty within what I write. And about names, just to, I think in the excerpt you read a bit earlier, I think, the narrator also says, there are 3 seas here: the Red Sea, the Dead Sea, and la mer blanche du milieu. Which is the Mediterranean, like a sort of literal translation of how the Mediterranean is called in Arabic. But it's never mentioned that it's the Mediterranean. It's just there as a way to invite a reader to also think about what would be that the White Sea of the middle within that context. So I think names are also that they just allow you to navigate.
To play also.
Play, totally play. And
because even the characters themselves wonder sometimes, like, okay, well, this we call that, but now it doesn't mean the same thing to me anymore.
But also when you're a writer, I mean, that's, I guess, the fundamental thing you're interested in. Like, you call things names, and then you think about the names you call things, and you're like, oh, that doesn't maybe fit, and then you become a writer to try
to change it.
Yeah, to try to figure out what the hell all this is. And in the case of Palestine, of course, I mean, obviously we all know there are also the fundamental political implications of naming who, what. It's not a sentence, but you get it. Like, what is named what and why. Like, we know, we are among many of the people who are very much aware of what these processes of naming and not naming do to a people, to communities, to histories as well. So yeah, it's all there.
So which brings me maybe about to ask a question about the writing process, and particularly writing during and around war and violence. It's a difficult question because in reality, it asks a million questions underneath. And so you are welcome to answer any aspect that will speak to you. But both your novels were not written during the present day wars. But they do offer so much in terms of layering of history, of the layering of the imagination, the accumulation of memories, the attempts towards this or that trajectory of a people, of individuals, of ghosts. And so it brings me maybe to the question of the role of the writer. And what's interesting for me today, having you both here, is you explore these questions in different ways. I will ask about the form, but feel free to go deeper. So in Carbide, and you mentioned this before, so maybe we'll continue. In Carbide, the narrator, very sarcastic, humorous at times, very pessimistic and dark at other times, all-knowing. There's a preface to the English translation, a two-pager that places a clear reference, and I think you agree since you mentioned it, to Voltaire's Candide. Can you tell us a little bit more about this anchoring? Why this anchoring of Voltaire? But also, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, from Ivan Koltyarevsky, born a few decades after Voltaire, pioneer of modern Ukrainian literature, but who also, from what I understand, worked with the burlesque, with satire. So can you talk a little bit more about these influences in your writing, even if it was 10 years ago?
Yeah, thank you so much. I have to admit that probably some things you can realize and discover only after years passed, and only when the full-scale invasion started, I realized why I wrote Carbide 8 years before that, and why it is, in a way, I have chosen this humoristic approach to face very serious social and political problems we have in our society. And I realized that humor is actually a very important part of our mentality and some kind of very important part of Ukrainian consciousness and self-consciousness, because during the last few centuries we were taken apart by different empires around Ukraine, mostly by Russia in the previous century, but still we were occupied, and our modern literature started not from some romantic hymn about the rebellion or something like this. It started from travesty. So with text by Ivan Kotlяревsky, it was written in 1798, and it is the beginning of the usage of modern Ukrainian language in the literature. So it is like Dante Alighieri, but his approach is full of humor and sarcasm. And only after the full-scale invasion, I realized I plus two, and I conclude that, in fact, humor is very anti-imperialistic. So when you have no possibility to oppose big power, for example, and you have no possibility to rebel against the empire, colonizer, occupator, you can use humor. So when Kotlяревsky in 1798 started to write this long poem, it was travesty to Virgil Aeneid. And it is very heroic epos in original. And after that, you receive this travesty about the Ukrainian Cossacks. But it is very funny story, and still even small children who are learning it in the school program now, they enjoy it because it is really funny and with a lot of jokes and very nice captures. And somehow, for example, when in 2022, for the first time, we received these threats from the Russians that they can use nuclear weapon against Ukraine, of course we were shocked in a way, and first reaction of the society was like, it is really the end, yeah? So it is some kind of apocalypse which can take place just in one day. And it is really traumatic for Ukrainian society because we were as a nation who gave up our nuclear weapons in 90s. After the collapse of Soviet Union, we have a lot of this arsenal of nuclear weapons, and we gave it. Yeah? So very pacifist, peaceful society, which now receives threats that if you will not surrender, you will be killed with nuclear weapons. Yeah? So it is some kind of nightmare, but a real horror. And response of Ukrainian society was really shocking because it made a flow of different internet memes and a lot of jokes. So we approach to this topic and to this threat from this humoristic side, you know, and it was actually very helpful, because when you see this tyrant and you cannot fight him, you have no weapons or you have no possibilities, you know, to win. But in fact, you can laugh and say, you are really full. You are so pathetic, yeah? And I think that actually what we are facing now with Mr. Trump and all of these accusations about the Greenland and so on, yeah? It is not only dangerous, but it is very, very pathetic. And what you can do to fight all this narrative, you can also fight it with laugh and saying that it is idiocracy in a way, yeah. So this approach, not to fight, but to make jokes and in a way ruin all of the pathetic narrative is very useful and very productive. So now I realize that why this novel is like long seller in Ukraine and still we have this new print runs and so on, because humor helped us a lot during our history and still helps us nowadays.
Thank you. In Les Dames à l'Aube, the narrator is the sky, almost all-knowing, almost eternal, almost human, I want to say, because it still needs pathways to kind of figure out what the characters are up to. There is, in this novel, a healthy dose of magic realism, or le merveilleux, right? And this magic realism, it seems to me, also comes through, in part, by the use of the culture of the Arabic language. As you said earlier, it's never about putting words in Arabic in the text. Rather, it's about infusing it at times with the imagination, with the references, the storytelling, the stories within the stories, the structure and the figures of speech sometimes, the and, et, wa. What does it mean for you to use this style to write about a context that you wanted to escape at first, but that, couldn't?
So I just had a reaction also to the question of humor. The Palestinian filmmaker Elia Suleiman, so I forget, I'm paraphrasing, but when speaking about his film Divine Intervention, said that Israeli soldiers don't care if you say they're horrible and cruel, etc., because that's a demonstration of power, and it's fine. What they care about is when you say they're ridiculous. That's much more effective. I mean, he was speaking a long time ago. We're in a new situation, but I think it's important also that there's a deep ridiculousness that is hidden by by extreme violence, but that's interesting to emphasize sometimes.
And Elia Suleiman does a great job with the humor in all his films, even the most recent.
I also want to respond to your prior question about writing during or about the war, because it's quite important, especially for all of us. And I would add another thing that's very uncomfortable is promoting your book during a time where writers are being killed, and you can travel around and talk about your book. It's a complicated position. So Les Dames à l'Aube was written way before the start of the destruction of Gaza. At least I think it was finished a year and a half before, and publishing times, it was set to publish. And when came publishing time, I had a real conundrum, which was, do I update the text somehow? Do I write a preface? Do I write something after? Like, what do I do? Or do I not publish that text until later? It was really a conundrum. I decided to not write a preface, to not do anything, because what I said earlier about also there are different timelines, and there is the time, the souffle of the longer time that is not only the time of our destruction, and it's important to be able to keep it. I changed 2 tiny sentences in the book.
Which ones?
They are so tiny that in fact, what I want to say is that there are 3 or 4 sentences about Gaza that were written before. Because obviously Gaza has been bombed for years. And so the sentences about Gaza, when you read them, you could assume that I added them after, but I did not. There is one moment where Wargrave is in Tel Aviv, and he's on a rooftop pool, etc., and he's having fun, whatever. And he thinks, du coup en français, but like Gaza, là-bas au loin, I forget the exact phrasing, but là-bas au loin, Gaza, cette chose retirée du monde, which I wrote before. I think it's important also because, of course, it shows the continuity we're in. And it's strange because some parts of the novel, so the Khamsin we've been discussing, it's a very violent wind in the book. And I say at some point that it kills, especially young men. And I put a number which I thought was just like, hyperbole. We are within the merveilleux, we are within stories of impossible. So at some point, the narrator says, the Khamsin killed more than 50,000 people. And when I wrote this, I was like, I'm just taking a number that's impossible, like I'm just saying 50,000. And obviously, we're beyond 50,000. It is absolutely sinister to consider that and to deal with that. So I just wanted to mention that, to also mention that profound discomfort that I haven't resolved also, which is, again, I'm here, safe, I have a French passport, I can travel, I am safe, etc. While not only my compatriots, but also my colleagues are being killed, among other people. So it's difficult to resolve, I think, that question. I'll be quick about the sky to not use too much time, but I'll segue into the sky. So the narrator is the sky, and by the sky, it is really that thing, like that physical thing. First of all, because I don't know, I thought it was fun. It's a fun challenge. I wanted the story to be told by a non-human character. And when I first started writing it, I had several narrators. They were all non-human. Some of them were better than others. So I always like to say this because I think it's quite interesting, because when you're a writer, you're just writing alone and you think it's great, and then you realize it's shit, and that this is the writing process, constantly realizing what you write is shit until it's out there and you can't do anything about it anymore. And in my first drafts, I had 3 narrators. The sky was always there, a bird, which then sort of became a character in the novels, and the third one, which I'm very proud of, was a sneaker, une basket.
A shoe.
Wait, but one, not two, not the pair. It was one. I was very proud of that. It was a whole thing about duality, unity, whatever. There was a whole thing. And so the narrator was a shoe. For a while, until late within the writing process, there was a shoe. I like to mention it first, again, because it's important to acknowledge that when you write, you're just figuring stuff out as you go. But also because when people know that, there are still traces of the shoe in the way the sky speaks sometimes. I think when you know that, you see the places where maybe that was a shoe speaking before, but now it's the sky. You can, and I like that about text, about narrators, is that they always carry all the mistakes you make and all the choices you make when you're writing. And the sky is, of course, when you say, oh, the narrator is the sky, you think it's this expansive, very powerful entity, godlike. But no, it's as you said,
it was a shoe.
Also, first of all, it's a shoe, and also because it's a love story, a lot of the things happen within closed spaces. So this guy has to sneak in to look at the characters in rooms, and so he's a sort of voyeur. We're voyeurs with him. It's fun to. I think one of my favorite things in the whole world, really makes me super excited, is when stories. When narrators can't keep their stories, and the characters sort of escape from anything you want to do, because we hate that, but it's amazing when it happens. And I think the sky also allows me to make space for stuff like that to happen.
Did this happen with the other characters also? Escaping you completely? Oh, not completely, but partly.
Unfortunately, not yet, but I don't lose hope that one day a character will escape, and I will be very happy.
Thank you. I want to open to questions. Are there any questions in the audience? Yes. Is there a mic we can... Yeah? Il faut l'allumer, je pense. You have to turn it on. Is it on? Yeah?
Yeah, like now. Okay. Thank you so much. So at some point in the conversation, the topic of borders came into the conversation, and of course, yeah, borders are, well, random to a high degree, sometimes absurd. Quite often they can be unjust. At the same time, borders, at least in the current imagination, are often important for identifying, kind of self-identifying as a peoples, as a nation, and obviously this plays a kind of quite important role in both regions. And I was just wondering how you think about this.
So I will start because my novel is about the borders. Yeah, I think that you're right, that somehow borders are random, but they're really important for different societies and different people, and usually they are misused. And one of my other novels, maybe more non-fiction novel, more documentary novel, is about or connected to a Roman poet called Ovid, Publi Ovidi Naso, and he was sentenced by the emperor to far away located Roman province called Mysia, and now we recognize it as Black Sea shore near the Danube river. And he wrote a lot of Tristia, these sad elegies from that harbor, and he portrayed barbarians who are after the border. And I think that this concept of barbarians, which was used by Ovid, the most important and most influential poet of his time, just to make some kind of disinformation. You know, it was first propaganda disinformation campaign made by the author, by the public figure. At that moment, he was like, you know, a celebrity. And why he used it? Because he was sentenced by the emperor to the some ugly place, some very far away from the capital and from the pleasures you can receive in the capital of the empire. And he actually used these barbarians to emphasize that his position is so bad, and he is so nice and smart and important and talented and so on. So he created image of barbarians in order to receive more empathy from his readers in the capital, and maybe it will turn in some way his fate, and he will be, you know, asked to return home. And I think a lot of very dangerous people and very dangerous people, rulers in the world now, are using this tool of border and someone who lives on the other side of the border to portray them as a barbarian and portray them as a threat to you, to your society, and use it just to manipulate his own society and, you know, and take a power. So we saw it at the same border. I was actually writing the story. We saw Hungary, and the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, 10 years ago, when the huge flow of the refugees from Syria started to go through Serbia and sent to Hungary, to other European countries, he also organized some kind of a referendum in his country. Are you supporting the possibilities that refugees, not Christian refugees, will come to Hungary and, you know, destroy our homeland and our homes? And nobody paid attention that no of the refugees want to stay in Hungary. They didn't go to Hungary. A lot of Hungarians don't want to stay in Hungary and go to other countries, yeah? Not to speaking about Syrians. But he used this portrait of barbarians and the portrait of he is as a big defender of homeland a big defender of the borders, which are so saint for them, just to disinformate and manipulate society. And that is why, of course, what we are facing now with all of these walls and fences are the same. And it is a very long story which has roots in Ovid poetry.
Karim, you want to respond?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of course, there's a lot to say about borders. I was just thinking, one of the other roles of a border, it is to identify, etc. But one of the concrete, measurable role of a border is that it kills. This is what a border does. In statistical term, this is what the borders of Europe tend to do. Like this is the Mediterranean is a graveyard because of borders. So again, I speak as a Palestinian who has a French passport, and I've had a French passport for a long time. And recently I realized I became really deeply French when I stopped thinking of I forgot that visas exist. I mean, not in general, but like I go places and I forget because now I have a French passport, so visas are not a thing in my head as a French person. And this ease is something that is incredible. And what it does is not only that it gives me ease, is that it makes life difficult for other people. I think that's this dichotomy is very important, I think, because borders aren't static. They do something, like they act. They're not just things that forbid, but there's an action that is made by a border. And so, as a Palestinian, from the West Bank, so again, specifically, because what do borders do? Borders, I say of the West Bank because obviously refugee Palestinians cannot come back. I have a certain leeway compared to other Palestinians in how I can go into the West Bank specifically or out. It's complicated, but I can still do it. Yes. So when I'm in Bethlehem, where I come from, there are settlements all around Bethlehem. They're on hills, so there are these like space stations at night. Like there's darkness, and there's this like, Terra Nor from space, from Star Trek. It's the same thing like that. You see it, and you see it growing as time goes by. And sometimes I look at night at the settlements, and you see the lights, of the people, their lives, etc. And so one of the borders is the invisible border that keeps me from being able to go to the settlement, because the settlement is in the West Bank, but we have separate roads, etc. There is no border, but there is a border. And I look at the settlements, and I really genuinely think, my God, what a nightmare it must be to be a settler. What a horrible, like sometimes I pity them. How awful it must be to have created a border and closed yourself in that border with the idea that, of course, everything around you is a wasteland of barbarians, and you are protecting yourself from the barbarians and conquering the barbarians with that border, when in fact somehow you are dead in your dead settlement. Like there is a thing also where borders don't only keep people outside, but they imprison they imprison settlers. Israelis can travel where they want in the world, super easy. So I don't want to make an equivalence between the two, but they, in the soul, are imprisoned as well.
Okay. Is there another question? I think we have one or two together.
Thank you very much for your talks. I have one question, because we talked about the duty of the poets. I think one of the duties to survive, maybe to make other people survive. But I wonder, you say you are safe here, but mentally, how do you manage, because you said you also go back and forth, and you see something, a totally different universe, and when you come back here, you probably overhear conversations about having a back pain because of stress or whatever, but it doesn't converge with another reality. So how do you stay sane, and what makes you still imagine things and write? How do you fit yourself?
That's a good question. Huh?
I personally don't. I haven't been able to write. I've been able to write op-eds, you know, like maybe opinion pieces about the situation, like things like that. I'm able to write, but personally, I would love to write fiction, but I'm not. It's not available now at all. And when I say I'm safe, I also just to also not, you know, like not to pretend. You know what I mean? Like I am here. Like, of course, it makes me crazy half the time, but there is a physical safety that exists. But I think that's a general question. Also, how do we, all of us, like, how do we act within the moments we're in? I'm just winging it from time to time, and I think. But what I would like to say is, personally, I don't think there is any. I mean, all answers are appropriate. I think whatever speaking about Palestine, for example, I think whatever any Palestinian does today is right. You know what I mean? Like, at this stage, whatever we say, we do, we're right. In the diversity, what I mean by that is, of course, we disagree all between each other, but we're dealing with such a tremendous thing that we're all like, figuring out, and we're wrong, like maybe what I'm saying today, I won't agree with myself in a week because everything is so monumentally changing by the day that, yeah. But I haven't kept my sanity.
Have or haven't? Haven't.
Thank you. It is a really nice question, and it actually allows me to speak about very different experience. And because first of all, when the full-scale invasion started, I felt disappointed with my work and felt disappointed with my actually lifelong project of writing and, you know, making some changes in society, in the consciousness of the readers and so on. I felt that it is totally unimportant. And when the war started, I dedicated myself to volunteer work. And for me, first weeks of the invasion, actually physical work was the best solution. I was working with humanitarian aid and, you know, just transporting and different cargo and sent it to the front line, to the city near the active war zone. And it was really nice because when you are, you know, taking some box with something, first of all, you cannot take your phone and read news. When you read news, you are so stressful. And when you do something physical with your hands, you feel like, you know, this possibility to touch what you are doing, not only have some metaphor or words in your computer, but to touch your help, to be practical, was really important for me. And I was not writing anything through the whole 2022, but then winter came, and I felt really depressed because, you know, I was doing a lot of volunteer job, and it was actually hard it was some kind of a new life, and I realized that I'm in the depression, and I realized that I need to go, I'm so exhausted, and I need to go to some psychotherapist and ask for some help, maybe some medicines or something like this. But fortunately, in Ukraine, when you have these religious holidays, nothing, you know, war or don't war, nothing works. Yeah. And when I called to this psychotherapist, he told me, okay, but call me after all of these holidays, and we will speak. And I realized that when I was a child, and then when I was a student, when I felt abandoned, or when I felt like fragile in a way, I wrote poetry. And it was very important for me. I wasn't a poet, like literary guy at that moment. I wrote poetry for myself, and I was doing it with my hand. And it was only for my notes, and it was very primitive. It was like graphomania about love and so on, but it helped me a lot. And I discovered during this winter of 2022-23 that actually creative work emotionally helps a lot. And I rediscovered it because when you are established writer, you have some, you know, please write us an essay, op-ed, please create some novel or something like this. You like work in it. And I realized that when I started my writer's life, it was only about me and about the emotion and about, it was a tool just, to write something by pencil in your notebook and immediately receive some relief in your life. So I used it, and it was, still helps me during these days.
Thank you. Do you want to say maybe a few words about poetry and about the collection that's going to come out? And then I think we have to say goodbye.
Maybe, but I think it's exactly that as well. Maybe not about the book that's coming out, but I did. So as I said, I've been writing. I was asked to write a lot of op-eds, etc. And not only in French, but also I'm in France. So I mean, my interlocutors are the French, and it was really like we needed someone to say something because it was catastrophic in France. So I did that also for that reason. But at some point in January of 2024. So, I know how to demonstrate things. I mean, my op-eds, they are very precise, they are sourced, because I know you have to play this respectability thing for the French to read you and to say, oh, maybe. So I I was like, every single sentence is going to be perfect so that they cannot say anything, And I wrote these things, and then, so people would tell me, oh, bravo, oh, but nothing would change. It was really, it's horrible, but everyone was like, oh, yeah, great, super. And at some point, I was so, I was so frustrated with this. I didn't know what to do. The only thing, and it really came very spontaneously, I wrote a poem. And before that, I wrote poetry as a child, but then I stopped. And I wrote a very long poem that I published somewhere that just talked about this fact that language, which is the thing I'm supposed to be good at, don't know how to use it, it's apparently useless, it doesn't do anything, like we all pretend it does, but in fact it does not. Like, it was really a poem about this impossibility, like it was a very emotional, very personal poem. I tend to not do personal stuff, but here it was super personal. And it was sort of, I think it was much more effective than all the op-eds, actually. But I didn't demonstrate anything in it, but yeah, I think it worked in a different way, and it really, so now I've been writing poetry also. I wrote before, but nothing, I never wrote poetry that I thought I would publish. It was just a thing for me, and that's it. And it did open this sort of alley that I never thought I was allowed in before.
I feel like we could speak all day. Thank you so much to both of you for coming. Thank you everyone for coming also. You can find Andriy, I think you have another talk right after about poetry, and Karim at Beaux-Arts a little bit later, 3:30 I think, so you can catch them then. And their books are available here. I think there's a bookstore and everywhere. Here and everywhere.
Merci.